Who is a living legend. It is David Duke. Hello, my friend.
Well, it's great to be with you, Mark, and I salute you and both the guests here on this broadcast, Jason and Patrick. Both of those are heroes as well. And usually I kind of start off with a big smile, and I'm a very optimistic person in general. But today I'm a little bit grim by what you're reporting and what I'm seeing around the world. And I see it, I tell you what, when I was very young, the first way I was red-pilled was on Marxism, was on Bolshevism. And I learned the evil what Bolshevism was by the time I was 12 years old. Thankfully, my father was a very strong anti-communist. He was a full colonel in the military. He had a very strong background and understanding of that. However, I became a little liberal because I read a lot, but then I started discovering the real deniers of human rights were the communists, and were the Bolsheviks, actually, of Russia. And over my lifetime, I think I've studied as much about Bolshevism as any particular political ideology or social ideology and movement in the world. And I also ended up for a number of years living in Russia, getting my doctorate in Ukraine, working even side by side for a while with Alexander Solzhenitsyn, the great Russian dissident. And I really learned about the history of communism firsthand by many people who lived through it, and the foundations and those whose parents lived through it, academics and others. And I think we've got to understand that, we often talk, and you have been a big proponent of the term, and I have too, the idea of cultural Marxism, that these are cultural Marxists. But make no mistake about it, and this is maybe one of the themes of the show, I think, that I would like to express here and get your take on it. They are cultural Marxists, yes. They're not the economic Marxists before. The Marxist movement really has gone from an anti-capitalist movement to one that actually embraces capitalism and the powerful financial forces and the banking forces of our world. They're globalists today in many ways. And it's the idea of cultural Marxism, meaning the idea of destroying the family, which it does, destroying our racial heritage, which it does, destroying our freedoms, which they do, taking our well-being, our property, which they do, the ethnic cleansing of European mankind, which is going on. But the fact is, it is not a cultural Marxism we have to fear. The fact is, these cultural Marxism, these cultural Marxist advocates, these cultural Marxists are actually, factually, true Bolsheviks in the real sense of the word. They are Bolsheviks. They want to shut down speech. They want to kill people. They will exterminate people, as the Bolsheviks did in Russia, tens of millions, as they did in every European country, where they did even around the world. They spread their Bolshevik theory even in places as far away as China and South Africa. And they kill people. They murder people. They take away basic human rights. They put people in prison. They torture people by the hundreds of thousands or the millions in some cases. This is where we're going. And right now, these so-called cultural Marxists, which are really Bolshevik tyrants, they are in the process, because they have the power, to shut down some of the last vestiges of our freedom of speech and press and assembly, and the right of people to protest this Bolshevism, this cultural Marxism, without losing their jobs, their career, their livelihood, being able to feed themselves and their family, and being able to be free. As you talked about with me earlier today before the show, PayPal is actually doxing people that contributed to a simple organization like Brexit. And of course, there's a lot of corporations that don't propose Brexit. And so a lot of these corporations are then firing people. They found out their employees contributed. This is not political freedom. This is not human rights. This is an attempt to destroy people's families, their careers, their ability to feed themselves. And this is just the beginning. What we're headed for, unless we wake up, unless we get our people awakened, we're headed toward a horror that is going to be far more resembling that of, say, Marxist, communist, Bolshevik Russia of the 19-teens and 20s and 30s and 40s than any sort of political model that we look at in Europe. It is really, this is their ultimate goal. This is what they're embarking on. And right now they're shutting down freedom of speech, human rights. We have and the media, in the name of human rights, is applauding the idea that some person should be put in jail by questioning certain aspects of history or even challenging current ideas on the biological aspects of race or heritage. A very fine and a brilliant guy, Ron Unz, has a good article in this publication about the racial discrimination at Harvard. Now, Harvard is like the elite school of America, and it centers around a case where Chinese, where actually Asian Americans, are being discriminated against at Harvard who are better qualified students. He wrote a paper earlier about this called The Myth of American Meritocracy, and he did talk about the fact that Chinese were discriminated against, but he also points out that European Americans are twice as discriminated against as Chinese or Asian Americans in terms of our Harvard educational system, the Ivy League, which is the elite of the country. That even though European Americans are 0.5%, they're in the top level of 0.5% of American high school students, according to National Merit Scholarships, which is a good judge of the elite of our high school graduates. Even though 70% of those are European Americans in this country, a tiny percent of them are actually admitted into Harvard. And even when they go to Harvard or Yale, they've got to be either, first of all, white males are discriminated against, different kinds of racial and ethnic, are just aside from their ethnic groups, different opinions about, sex or family. People who are for gay marriage, they can't. They're not going to get accepted into Harvard because they no longer use the academic qualifications. If you've got to go along with this powerful ideology of cultural Marxism and Bolshevism to get into these schools, and yet these are the elite that control our country. But the ultimate is not just simply dispossessing us from the elite in my country, America, or Canada, or Great Britain, or France, or Germany, or Italy. Ultimately, these people, fundamentally, the idea that I want to get across to all of our listeners today is that these people are not just cultural Bolsheviks, they're physical Bolsheviks who seek to lock us up. They seek to suppress our freedoms. They seek to take our children from us when they can. They've even done that in Europe in many places. They seek to take our children from us. They seek to ethnically cleanse our people from our own lands through massive immigration, which is nothing more than ethnic cleansing, by lessening our birth rate, by destroying the traditional family, by sickening us in every way possible, both our health, our well-being. They're getting our people on drugs. They're getting kids with all kinds of addictions. And it's just amazing. And what their ultimate plan is, eventually they're going to go into a full bore mode. But not only do they take us off the internet, and not only do they take away our freedom of speech entirely, but that's when they start to lock us up and torture us in the prisons unless we rise up now intelligently. And that's why this fight for freedom and freedom of speech is as important as any fight we've had. It's just as important, in fact, as the immigration issue. Even though the immigration issue changes the demographics, people can resist a bad demographic if they're motivated, but only if they get the truth. If you don't have a free press and the ability to communicate and the ability to organize, then you have no chance of survival. And I would really like people to put in the forward issue of today this shutting down what's happening on our freedom of speech and thought, and the idea that these Bolsheviks are not just cultural Marxists, they're full-scale Bolsheviks that will repeat the same kind of mass murder and oppression and horror to innocent people that existed in Russia, Europe, and many places of the world, where 100 million people worldwide have died from communism. And we're approaching, I believe, we're very close to an all-out type Bolshevik society. It's not the same economics, but it's the same tribal Bolshevism that is determined to wipe out European mankind and to create a world dictatorship under the control of these people. And by the way, the people, as we know, who run Bolshevism are the same bankers who control capitalism. That's what's interesting about it. It's always been that way. So that's just subjects that I think are important to dwell on today.
Yeah, definitely. And you mentioned something earlier when you